was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night that made you feel like you were being watched. Emily had just moved into her new apartment, a cozy little place in the heart of the city. She had heard rumors that the building was haunted, but she had dismissed them as mere superstition. As she was settling in for the night, she heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. It sounded like someone was dragging their feet along the carpet. Emily cautiously peeked out of her door, but saw nothing. She shrugged it off and went back to bed. But the noise persisted. It was louder now and more insistent. Emily couldn't ignore it any longer. She grabbed a flashlight and cautiously opened her door. The hallway was empty, but as she shone her light down the corridor, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There was a figure standing at the end of the hallway, just out of reach of her flashlight. It was tall and thin, with long arms and legs that seemed to stretch on forever. Its face was twisted into a grotesque mask of pain and suffering. Emily tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. The figure started to move towards her, its long fingers reaching out as if to grab her. Emily turned and ran back into her apartment, slamming the door shut behind her. But the figure was relentless. It pounded on her door, its fingers clawing at the wood. Emily knew she had to get out of there. She fumbled for her phone and dialed 911, but there was no answer. The line was dead. She looked around the room frantically, searching for a way out. That's when she saw it, a small hatch in the ceiling. She scrambled up onto a chair and pushed it open, revealing a cramped crawl space. Without hesitation, Emily climbed up into the crawl space and started crawling through the narrow ducts. She'd hear the figure pounding on her door, its long fingers scratching at the wood. She crawled for what felt like hours, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, she saw a glimmer of light up ahead. It was a small window, and outside she could see the moon shining down on the city. Emily pushed open the window and climbed out onto the roof. She collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. As she looked up at the night sky, she saw the figure standing on the roof across from her, twisted face staring back at her. Emily knew she could never go back to that apartment again, but as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still watching her, waiting for her to come back. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she turned a corner or entered a dark room, she felt a shiver run down her spine. One night, as she was walking home from work, she saw the figure again. It was standing at the end of the street, just out of reach of the streetlights. Its twisted face seemed to be staring right at her. Emily tried to run, but her feet felt heavy, as if they were rooted to the ground. The figure started to move towards her, its long arms and legs reaching out as if to grab her. Emily closed her eyes and braced herself for the worst, but when she opened them again, the figure was gone. She told herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, that the figure wasn't real. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Days turned into weeks again, and Emily tried to move on with her life. She got a new apartment, one that was far away from the old one, and tried to put the past behind her. But one night, as she was lying in bed, she heard the dragging noise again. She knew what was coming next. The figure appeared at her bedroom door, its twisted face staring right at her. Emily tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. She tried to run, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. The figure moved closer and closer, its long arms and legs stretching out impossibly. Emily closed her eyes and braced herself for the worst. But when she opened them again, the figure was gone. She was alone in her apartment, the only sound the pounding of her heart. From that day on, Emily knew she could never escape the figure. It would always be with her, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Emily tried everything she could to rid herself of the figure that haunted her, but it seemed to follow her wherever she went. She even sought the help of paranormal investigators and psychics, but they were unable to offer any real solutions. As time passed, Emily became increasingly isolated and paranoid. She stopped going out at night and avoided dark places at all costs. She even stopped answering the phone, afraid that the figure might be on the other end of the line. One day Emily received a letter in the mail. It was addressed to her, but there was no return address. Curiosity getting the best of her, she opened it up and found a single sheet of paper inside. On the paper was a drawing of the figure that had been haunting her. But this time there was something different about it. The face was still twisted and grotesque, but the eyes were sad and pleading. Underneath the drawing was a message written in shaky handwriting. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Please forgive me." Emily didn't know what to make of it. Was this some kind of sick joke? Or was the figure trying to communicate with her? She tried to put it out of her mind, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still watching her, waiting for her to respond. Days turned into weeks once again, and Emily began to feel like she was losing her mind. She couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat, she couldn't think straight. The figure was consuming her every waking moment. One night, as she was lying in bed, she heard the dragging noise again. But this time it was different. It sounded more like a gentle tapping. Emily cautiously peeked out of her bedroom door and saw the figure standing there, holding a small box in its long, thin fingers. The figure held out the box to her, its sad eyes pleading for forgiveness. Emily took the box and opened it up. Inside, she found a small, hand-carved wooden figurine. It was a replica of the figure that had been haunting her, but this time it looked almost friendly. At that moment, Emily realized that the figure wasn't there to hurt her. It was there to apologize. With tears in her eyes, Emily reached out and hugged the figure. It was the first time she had ever touched it, and she was surprised to find that it felt warm and human. From that day on, Emily and the figure became inseparable. She kept the wooden figurine with her at all times, and the figure seemed to be content to simply watch over her. Emily had finally found peace, and she knew that the figure was no longer a source of terror, but a source of comfort and protection.